this beast because they've been seeking it for many, many years. To go over the panel's qualifications, we first have Gary Annett, Chief Executive Officer for MJM Marine, one of the world's premier outfitters. Gary's company did 38 major refits last year alone. So they have thousands of people literally flying around the world at any given time working on cruise ships. Next, we have Stephen Friars, consultant for Royal Caribbean. Stephen, by training, is an architect and project manager. His most recent assignment was with the Celebrity Equinox for Royal Caribbean, which just finished up in Cadiz. And then we have Bas Loohuis, who is in charge of all dry docking for Damen Shipyards. Damen is new in the new building game, as some of you know. They've just signed a contract with Seadream for a new building, but they are doing 25 to 30 cruise ship dry dockings a year on maintenance and major refits. So Bas is very well qualified to express the shipyard perspective on the perfect dry dock. As for me, I started in the cruise industry in 1968 when I first signed on board what wasn't even called a cruise ship, but a liner. I retired as Vice President Fleet Operations for Seabourn Cruise in 2011, and since that time have been working as a consultant on new builds and major refits for many of the leading cruise lines. Most recently, I've been involved in the new building contract for the Seadream ship with Damen. So how are we going to find this unicorn of an ideal dry dock? It probably would help to describe what the animal looks like. And there's no secrets there. The project has to be on time, on budget, and with zero defects. Very much easier said than done. So perhaps we can kick it off with these gentlemen and talk about what keeps us from finding this perfect dry dock. What are some of the pitfalls that we really should be seeking to avoid? Gary?
Well, Larry, it's key to all the projects is the time and the lead into the development. As the industry grows more and more, the time to deliver these projects is getting shorter and more challenged. So we have to approach that in some different ways to collaborate closer at the start, work with the design team to see how we can come up with innovative ideas to do a lot more prefabrication, to organize our logistics better, and to drive some changes in the industry to prevent what you were talking about at the end, which was the snagging and zero defects.
Yeah, obviously there are quite a number of different disciplines that go into all of the planning, all of the makeup of one of these major refits. Stephen, I know you've been working with Royal Caribbean, and they've got an enormous department there keeping track of all of these aspects. What's your view on how it works? What can go wrong? What can go right?
As you know, the projects are getting bigger and more technical in what is required. New decks being added for cabins and even lengthening of ships, ducktails. So there's a multidiscipline team involved that has to be coordinated and controlled, and everybody working in the same direction. If you have people off on their own, it doesn't work. So that is a aspect that certainly at Royal Caribbean they have worked very hard with the department in order to put together teams of people that are specialized in this industry in order to make the projects go smoother and to assist with MJMs of this world, etc., to ensure that we have, as Peter Fetton once said, as much go right as can go right and as little go wrong as can go wrong. So,
Very good. Design obviously plays a major role in all of these refits. Nothing can happen until we have a design. What's your experience with the design process, and what should people be aware of as they approach design for a major refurbishment?
I'll maybe take that, Stephen. I think gone are the days where there's a very clean-cut design leading into a project. There's a lot more collaboration on how a design is developed, looking at ways and dealing with the lead time issues that are around the supply chain as well, to ensure that the concept, the product can be delivered and achieved in the time. So certainly we're finding that we're involved a lot earlier, helping to break that process down. And often budgets are constraints in the project timeline as well. So the earlier you get involved, then you can influence and try and deal with those issues up front.
Yeah, some wise person once said, good design takes time, and time is often in short supply on these projects. So there's an inherent conflict there that, I think everyone has to bear in mind from the beginning.
yes. I think also the new builds are leading the designs as well to a large extent. So what's coming through from new build, and obviously trying to keep the fleet fresh. So a lot of the designs that are on the new builds are now, you're implementing some of those into the modernizations.
Yeah. And of course, once you've got a design, the shipyard is a next major consideration. Bas, from your point of view, what are the key components of a cruise line deciding on a shipyard?
Well, first of all, it goes without saying that my neighbors are working for years on the design, on the prefabrication. Then it has to all come together at the yard. There are some simple items that are important, to be close to a turnaround point, to be close to a container port, to have lots, heaps of space around the dock, and of course have a humongous hole in the ground where the ship fits. And then, of course, the preparation starts, that all the parties involved have to come together and discuss how that last stint, basically, of this whole preparation is going to work. I would like to differentiate a couple of different projects. We have as our customers the older ladies, which basically don't go through big refits but are maintained. We have got the, let's say, the 2-week dockings, the intermediate dockings, which are challenging, but in principle, what are we talking about? About up to 500 containers on the yard, 1,500 people running around the yard. But then, of course, you have the longer dockings or the revamps, and these are massive logistic challenges. Up to 1,500 containers, 3,000 people walking around your yard, and you have to do it within the time and safe. So, in principle, if you as a yard can fit within that package, you are a possible partner.
And once we have a shipyard, and presumably we have a primary contractor, such as an MJM, they don't do the jobs alone. Gary, you're finding subcontractors to work for you on many levels. What's current experience? I would think that with the yards so busy and so many projects going on, it must be difficult to find people, eh?
Well, the industry leaders this morning were talking about the challenges and attracting talent into the industry, new players coming into the market. and the supply chain. You know, everybody's finding that difficulty in terms of delivering those projects. I don't think any of us have cracked that solution where it's a constant battle to find the right people, to retain the people, and to make sure that the subcontractors, the key elements that go into that, are all aligned in how you deliver a project.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, you know, because there's so many people involved already on a bigger refit, and there's so many refits going on in the world, and we have 2 seasons. We have a spring season and we have a fall season. How many more experts are there around in the world? So that means that when you have got your team together on the yard, and I mean all partners together, if there's emerging work, that's a challenge. You know, how do you deal with that emerging work, you know?
I think also from the owner's perspective, it's there is a limited pool of contractors out there, and it's with the amount of work that's on now, it's very difficult. The contractors themselves are stretched to breaking. So on that, with new vendors coming in, it's good for the industry. However, it is also a risk for the owner to take a new partner in that is maybe not known.
Yep.
So that has to be weighed up when you're working with newer vendors coming in.
Yeah, also to add to that, you know, in normal shipbuilding, normal ship repair projects, you see at the beginning of a project, if you look at the man-hour histograms, you know, you have a nice S-curve, slow starts, let's say. Well, in the cruise business, that's not happening. It is immediately to 100% and stay on there till the ship leaves. It's such a different world.
Yeah.
So people from outside the industry who could do a good job should just monitor one of these dockings and then see if they're up to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, project management is another challenge as we go through this. You know, you talk about all of the planning that goes in, and I know the cruise lines and the shipyard, the outfitters, all of them have their own Gantt charts, and they've all gone through quite a lengthy planning process. What's your experience in terms of how these plans ultimately come together?
Well, I think it's important to start and draft a plan, but it's very, very critical in the overall amount of days that you're in dock. Things can go wrong. There can be discovery issues, and you have to have the agility to be able to deal with that. Most of us are reporting on our plans daily, and certainly the tasks are broken ground quite a lot. So it's really important to have a little bit of flexibility. We need a strong plan to begin with, but with collaboration on board and working with all the contractors. And lots of these projects will have 20, 30 other contractors working. And you find it as an industry, when you get to Drydock and you get in that situation, that there's a really strong bond between all the contractors, competitors or not.
Yeah.
You can have the best laid plan, but you know it's never going to be stuck to. There's always something that pops up. You know, you have cranes go down for a day, your plan's suddenly gone.
Yeah.
And to Gary, as he said, you have to be somewhat flexible and be able to work within an environment such as that. And to your point of bringing others in to look at the industry, a lot of people would probably not want to hang around for a great deal of time when they see how we actually work in the middle of a dry dock.
Yeah.
But there is a good communication set up on board all of the projects. You've got your AM and your PM meetings, so everybody gets the opportunity to deal with those issues. And there's no hanging around for 2 weeks of a decision. The decision needs taken by the owner, by designer, or the lead project, whatever the case may be. So you find that you'll work through these issues a lot quicker than you would in from construction-based identities.
Yeah, and that's why if you look at a project team, you know, all of the disciplines are there in order to be able to make those decisions, because you can't be going back to the office and asking for a decision to be made. You don't have the time. You have to be able to make that decision there and then, rightly or wrongly. And sometimes we do get it wrong.
Yeah, from a yard's perspective, if you see what is our share in the work, in principle that is reasonably limited. I would say of the whole budget, we take on about 15%, maybe a little bit more, and maybe in the future that will grow more. So what do? The hull, the propulsion, stabilizers, rudders, all the mechanical work, painting, artwork. But there is one very important part that we take on, and that is a huge part of the logistics, and that is right in the middle of the critical path. So there, the cooperation with all the teams is extremely important, and I totally agree. You know, how we explain it at our yards is one day late is 5,000 hotel beds to pay, because your customers are waiting with a suitcase on quayside. So it's not an option. It's just not an option. Yeah.
To your point on the logistics aspect, the logistics to me is one of the most important aspects of a project. Your logistics can make or break you. You know, so to me, it's something which we spend a lot of time looking at and making sure we know where containers are, where they're meant to be, when they're meant to arrive, all of that aspect, and even to the planning of the locations around the yard for the containers, etc. It's a very vital part of a project.
Yeah. When you think that a typical project requires literally hundreds of containers being loaded, discharged, and that the work can only go forward once that material is on board in the right place at the right time, it's quite staggering that anything gets done on time, frankly.
That's true.
So the logistics guy has got a big job.
They do, and they unfortunately don't get the praise they deserve at times, because they are, as I say, vitally important to the project.
Yeah.
Not that the outfitters are not either, but
Well, it's one big team, Stephen. At the end of the day, you get there. It's
exactly.
we all perform. Or
Correct.
none of us.
Yeah.
perform.
Correct.
Very good. So to sum up, from the three perspectives we have here, what's the most important factor in a successful dry dock from the shipyard's point of view?
As said already, logistics. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Stephen, from an owner's project point of view?
Making sure you deliver on time with as little defects as possible, and that the ultimate customer, ourselves, are happy with the work that's being done.
Really maximising the time before you get to the dry dock. By that stage, if you haven't got most things in place, the timeline is going to catch you very, very quickly. So early decisions from the owners, which is a very important part of that, and the design process, maximising what we can lift out of the design to prefabricate and come to the ship ready to straight install.
Good. Yeah, if I can risk summing up here, I mean, it's clear that there is a tremendous number of people involved in each of these refits, and the coordination between them is critical. All of the players involved spend a lot of time developing detailed plans, but as an old soldier said, no battle plan ever succeeds the first contact with the enemy. Well, no dry dock plan ever succeeded the first day in the shipyard. So to me, the most critical thing about dry dock success is having a team in place that has good experience. They've done this before. They know what Plan B is, regardless of what situation arises, and then can approach that Plan B together without a lot of histrionics and problems. And I think one of the things that keeps a lot of us coming back to doing dry docks is just that camaraderie and experience that we have with it. So
That and a short-term memory.
No, but if I can add to that, you already mentioned the AM PM meetings, and that is where it all comes together, and that is where the issues are being discussed, and that is where, I would say, with military precisions, let's say the decisions are being made. It is we go that way, that way, that way, and that's it. No democracy.
Yeah.
Continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Okay, I hope we've given you a little picture of dry docks, dry dock problems, how we try to overcome them. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
I think there's a microphone coming.
Hi, this is more about the process right before dry dock, but coming from an interiors point of view, I work in lighting, and what I notice is a lot of the issue is the design work. It just keeps going back and forth. The design, I feel like, for refits needs to kind of be VE'd in the first place. Like the VE process of going through and then having to rebudget every single time pushes everything back so far. The fixtures, everything else gets purchased too late, then things get installed too late, and it just makes it all that much more stressful. So it would make more sense if the design was not so much about making sure the executives liked it, but making sure that it's realistic from the get-go. And I think that that's a mentality that needs to change more than anything else. Like, we just need to say, sorry, this is the budget you have. This is what it's going to look like, and be happy with it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done when you have a chief executive that comes down to your desk and demands that we have to have this. I agree to a large point in what you're saying, but in reality, the executives of the cruise lines, they have a vision, and our job is to implement that vision. And if they make changes, we have to work with those changes. That's why it's somewhat of a dynamic exercise. We have to constantly just rework. Yes.
Well, and to your point, the reality is that before the ship gets into dry dock, in each cruise line there are a huge number of stakeholders, all of whom feel obligated to have an impact on the design and on the concept. And that makes getting decisions on final designs very, very difficult. And I sympathize with your situation.
But a lot of that's driven out of the new build process as well. Obviously, ship owners are trying to ensure that in a ship revite, you're coming with the latest product. So as ships are getting delivered, things are being adopted across. I hope there's not too many designers in here. We're trying to slate the designers all the time. But we have a self-fulfilling prophecy here. Every time we sort of push some boundaries and you deliver something, that becomes the new norm. If you go back 15, 20 years ago, the scale of the works and the overall organization, that was much, much different from where we are today. So whilst the industry has come a long, long way, I think we're pushing that boundary line again in terms of the scales of the projects, the technical aspects, and bringing in a lot of the new products very, very late into the process.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah, for sure.
Any other questions?
Hello. This question is in reference to the project management aspects. When you talk about the logistics, how many different references of teams are happening in, say, like a new build versus like a renovation? Could you tap on that to just give perspective in reference to like cross-referencing in like a hotel?
Yes. New builds, as I said, are a big influence on the projects. So from that aspect, yes. Certain methodologies that are used in new build, if it is applicable to a refurbishment, revitalization, then obviously it would be tried to be used as much as possible. So yes. Not all of them are easily transferred because of the timelines. New build, you've got a longer period to be able to work and make changes in a more controlled environment as opposed to a dry dock where it's, as we've said, decisions have to be made instantly.
Now we would, from a yard's perspective, we would cut up the management team into manageable chunks. So package managers, let's say, and one for the underwater part, one for the propulsion part, and definitely a couple on the logistics part. So make it manageable.
The other side, difference between new building and refurbishment. With a new building, you know what you're working with. With a refurbishment, you never know what you're going to find when you open something up. So there are many more surprises.
Yes.
Other questions? Sir?
Yes, what is the time requirement for the standard passenger ship to have to visit a dry dock? Would it be every year, every 2 years, or what would the regulations be?
A lot of that depends on the age of the ship. Classification societies have different rules. If memory serves, once a ship becomes, is it 30 years old, then it's required to dry dock every
Year. Yep.
Is it every year? Yeah.
Yeah.
Bas, maybe you're more qualified.
Yeah, no, that's true. So the older ladies, it's every year. By normal class rules, it's every 2.5 years you have an intermediate docking, and every 5 years you have the full class docking.
Yeah. Is that any other questions?
Is it ever, I guess I'm not too familiar with how these ships get built, so I'm just curious, like, does it ever happen where the boat's not necessarily in the yard? It's actually happening while there's guests on the ship itself?
Gary?
Yes, there's projects that happen in service, depending on the brand and how they approach that, from new reveals on retail to restaurant rebates and things like that. It's a little bit less generally in the industry. Nobody wants to see contractors aboard, particularly passengers, but some brands have approached that in a slightly different way and promoting the next cruise and, you know, doing a reveal on a new space that's coming through. It has different challenges. You're chasing ships around the world, different ports, so the logistics bit ramps up another bit at that stage, so it does happen.
Hello, my name is Joep Bollerman. I work for Lloyd's Register. I wanted to just expand on the comment earlier about the interval for dry dockings. It is a SOLAS, so an IMO requirement for the ship to go into dry dock twice in every 5-year period. And every 5-year period is the first 5 years of the ship's life or the second 5 years. Or it's not a sliding scale, but they're like the blocks of the 5-year period of the ship's life. Class rules are in line with that. They need to have 2 dry dock credits every 5-year period. And one of those dry dock credits can be done in the water. So if the ship is assigned with provisions to take measurements of the clearances of the shafts and the rudders, high-resistant paint is applied, and other things are there to allow this dry dock credit to be applied while the ship is in the water, then the ship really only has to go into dry dock once every 5 years. And that is for ships typically up to 15 years. Some flag states allow up to 20 years to have that in-water survey as one of the 2 credits. Once the ship is over 20 years old, or in most cases over 15, the ship has to go into dry dock every 5-year period 2 times. Never more than 36 months between 2 credits. So just thought I'd clarify that a little bit. And,
Thank you for the clarification. Anyone else, sir?
Where is it?
Hello. For a dry dock, if it's too short, it's inefficient and you need enough time to be able to finish the work. But if it's too long, people can burn out and again, people start working inefficiently. So in this ideal dry dock, how long do you think is the ideal amount of time for a dry dock to last?
I'll maybe answer that one. For us, we've done projects at 10, 12 days, right through to 37. We had one not so long ago where there was a 3-month period. And exactly that, Simon, we hit that point where we had people stretched out a long time. I think somewhere in the mid-20s, if we can get the scope aligned with that, that's an ideal time to allow for some slippage at the startup phase on logistics and getting into the yard, getting set up. And you can hit a lot of work in 25 days, I can tell you.
On that point, I know from within Royal Caribbean that the length of dry docks is longer. Especially you take the likes of Oasis, I think is 68 days, if I recall. There is thinking and planning going on with regards to being able to allow the personnel to take a break during the project in order to try to keep them fresh. So they would have a few days off, etc. for it. So yeah. It is something that as the dry docks get longer that we are having to think about for sure.
And from a yard's perspective, in principle, if it's not an emergency docking because of pots or propeller or whatever damage, in principle, the schedule is driven by the hotel work and not so much by the platform maintenance. Yeah,
Sure. Yes.
Any other questions? If not, I'll thank you all for your attendance and hope we enlightened you on the unicorn of the perfect dry dock. So thank you.